This is the first Tuesday of the month Waupaca City Council meeting.
Our scheduled City Council meeting today is Tuesday, June 4th, 2019, and I call this meeting to order, and let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll ask Sandy to read the clerk's open meeting statement for us.
This meeting and all other meetings of the Common Council are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the press in accordance with Wisconsin state statutes, so the citizens may be aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
And roll call also.
Brian Smith,
Here.
Steve Hackett, Lori Chestnut,
Here.
Paul Hagan,
Here.
Alan Keeland,
Here.
Scott Prochatsky,
Here.
Dave Peterson,
Here.
Paul Mayo,
Here.
Dimitri Martin,
Here.
Mary Fair,
Here.
and Eric Olson.
Here.
9 present, we have a quorum.
I do want to introduce you to Tom Hart. He is with Hart Law Office, and our contract, of course, is for city attorney is with Hart Law Office. So Tom is, we'll probably see a lot more of you, Tom, and less of John, I'm guessing.
Hope so.
I was going to say hope so, but I'm glad you did. No, just kidding. All right. Well, welcome. Hopefully we'll make this painless for you. Consent agenda. These are items where we vote with just one motion, unless there's an item on the consent agenda that you would like to see moved to the regular agenda. If so, this is the time to let us know that you would like to do that. If not, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Keelan, second by Chestnut, right? Yep. That we approve the consent agenda as printed. Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Under the regular agenda, this is really under the announcements and correspondence. You'll see that Kathy has put a bunch of paperwork on your desk, and we'll be getting into that shortly. So I think you have 3 handouts, is that right? 3 handouts you should have on your desk. Okay, besides that, the agenda is as printed. With those couple of additions, we would need a motion to approve that agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Peterson, second by Olson, that we approve the regular agenda with those 3 additional handouts. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. All right, let's go to non-agenda items and announcements. And we have a presentation on the city TIF district and a review of the annual TIF report. And Kathy, I'll let you lead us here.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. On your desk are 3 handouts. One is the presentation by Baird. Second one is some spreadsheets with the graphs. And the last one is a list of all the items that we're going to be going over and highlighting. And those are much like your cheat sheet for tonight. Because, of course, it's TIF and there's lots and lots of numbers. So tonight we have Brian Rico from R.W. Baird. Brian's been here before going over the status of the TIF districts. And right now I can't get my things up on the screens, so I hope everybody can just follow along on the paper. So Brian, you want to
Okay,
take
sure.
away?
I assume this is on? Help.
You're good.
Test. Okay, good.
Yep.
Well, good evening, everyone, once again, ladies and gentlemen. Since you have the paper copy, I'll kind of go through that and follow. If you want to just follow along, take your page by page through the analysis and the report that we put together for the city. It's going to be a lot of numbers, a lot of information. Obviously, a lot of this is going to need you to review over the next few months, and I believe Kathy's going to have this again at budget time in about 6 months. We'll be going through this all again. There's no obviously decisions tonight that need to be made, no recommendations. It's just going to be an overview of your existing TIF districts and the analysis that we put together. So if you want to go to page 2 of the presentation. Under executive summary, I'll just highlight a few little points on that page. As it states right on top, the TIF districts, that's probably your most powerful economic development tool that a municipality has. And the city's had a long history of using TIF, tax incremental financing, and TID districts to not only for tax-based growth, but blight elimination or to lead development of newly created commercial industrial parcels and expanded employment opportunities. Currently, the city has 6 active TIDs in existence. 3 are blight, TIDs 4, 6, and 10, and 3 are industrial, TIDs 3, 8, and 9. And we're going to go over each one of those individually in a lot of detail, but that gives you just an overview of each of your TIDs that are in existence as of today. Obviously, the TIDs, as it's showing in the bottom part on the left-hand side, there's challenges that are created. Rehabilitation parcels regularly incur significant costs for demolition, remediate environmental contamination, and preparing the parcel for new development. For these reasons, the cost-to-revenue ratio for TIDs with a focus on rehabilitation is significantly greater than TIDs created to foster new residential and commercial development, and we'll show that in some of the presentation later on in the presentation to follow. The challenge that's being faced by TIDs 3, 8, and 10 are affected by these areas. But it's important to recognize that significant benefit to the city and all the overlying taxing entities is the redevelopment that's occurring in each of the TIDs 3, 8, and 10 that's shown at the top on the right-hand side for expanded employment base, offering jobs, decent compensation with those jobs. And of course, the main test that has to be done by a TIF is the but-for test, which you've probably heard about that. Would the development occur without the use of TIDs, about the TID district? And that is being factored into each one of the TIDs. Existing TIDs then are shown then from TIDs 3 to 10 in the middle of page 2. Just a note that there were 2 TIDs that were closed not too long ago. TID number 19 closed early this year. TID number 5 closed in early 2019, and TID 7 closed in 2018. So of the 6 existing TIDs, 3 were created in 2000 and 3 in 2001. The incremental growth of these districts increases property values by $70.5 million to date. And we'll go into each one of those individually. These figures don't include the TID 5 that was closed, and TID 9 has a negative increment that we'll talk about later on. So right now, your incremental value for the city for TIDs computes to over 60% of equalized value. So if you go to the top of page 3, that exceeds there's a 12% statutory limitation for TIDs, that you can't have TIDs exceeding 12%. You will not be able to create a new TID or be able to make any boundary adjustments unless you're under that 12% limit. Right now, the city is over that limit, so right now, you cannot create a new TID or make any boundary or amendments to a TID until you're under that 12. So that, as it states there in that first paragraph on top there on the left side on page 3, you'll need to terminate additional TIDs in order to free up capacity, and we'll talk about each one of those. We're going to go into each of the TIDs more in detail, but in the middle of page 3 on the left side, you'll see TID 3 was designated as distressed in 2010, and currently TID number 6 donates to TID number 3 to cover annual expenditures. It's expected that TID 3 will close in 2023, but the city would like to pay off expenditures early with the assistance of TID number 6. So both TID 3 and 6 could close as early as 2021. With the closure of these 2 TIDs, the incremental value would then be reduced below the 12%, and that will allow the city to create a new TID or amend boundaries in an existing TID. TID number 4 is self-supporting and is a donor to TID number 8. TID number 8 is not self-supporting, and its significant cumulative balance, which is shown on our pro forma, we'll show on page 26 and 27, is due to the utility advances, which in large part will need to be repaid prior to closing the TID. TID number 9 is a single parcel TID with negative increment value and no outstanding expenditures. Then at the top on page 3 on the right side, TID 10 right now does not generate enough annual revenues to cover debt service, but it has a fund balance and is receiving transfers of TID number 9 to make up the differences. We'll talk about challenges later on, but there are obviously challenges that are facing tax increment financing districts, annual projects. The component of the annual analysis projects annual TID revenues compared to TID annual expenditures. The challenge that faces all the TIDs is the fixed nature of the expenditures versus the variable nature of the revenues. An example is most TID expenditures are funded by the issuance of debt, and the debt typically has fixed payments over a long period of time. For general obligation debt, that can be up to 20 years. So then the revenue stream, which comprise predominantly tax revenue for TIF districts, your tax increment, varies annually based on changes to property value in the TID and the combined equalized tax rate. As with any projections, we state the further into the future the projection spans, the confidence placed in subsequent years' projections is reduced. Additional challenges that can have a significant impact on TID revenues include the following: state legislative changes. Going to the top of page 4, there's Department of Revenue assessment practices changes, and of course the economic downturn that everyone experienced back in the late 2007. It's more detailed information in the back that we'll touch on regarding those. So basically, TID project plans drafted years prior to changes that we've just mentioned have forced the city to adopt to a challenge of TID revenues falling short of projections developed under an entirely different set of fiscal circumstances. The rest on page 4 kind of goes over just an explanation of tax increment financing districts. I'm going to let you kind of read that, and if there's any questions, you can let Kathy know on those. Page 5 is a real hard to read map, but I was looking up there. I think that map probably has all the TIF districts indicated where they are located within the city. So then, unless there's any specific questions on the beginning, we'll go into the individual TIDs analysis that was done. So starting on page 6 of the presentation, we'll talk about your district number 3, which was a business park district. This was a district, it's an industrial TID, and it's one of 3 active TIDs that the city created in 2000. The TID has generated an increment value of $12,794,700 as of 2018. It was declared distressed in 2010 and is a recipient TID. So this is it's receiving support from TID number 6 to pay annual expenditures. And based on the current status of the pro forma that we developed, which is going to be on page 10 and 11, we'll get to shortly, TID 3 is anticipated to close in 2023. The city would like to close TID 3 earlier with the assistance of TID number 6 being that donor TID. It is expected that when TID 3 and TID 6 close, the city's value will be reduced less than the 12%, which I mentioned previously, where you'll be able to create a new TID or amend the boundaries of an existing TID. And that detailed 12% limitation will be later on. It's on page 44. We'll get into that for all the TIDs. On page 7 is just a summary of the TID. The top part is the location, the type of the TID. As I mentioned, it was industrial. It had a 23 maximum life. And the dates, creation dates, final amendment, the final date to incur TID expenditures, the anticipated closing date, the unextended closing date, and then because of the designation of distress, there is an additional 10 years. So right now the district could stay open until 2033. Different amendments that occurred. There was one amendment. It was a distressed amendment. And then the value increment that is shown for 2018 based on the actual that the Department of Revenue has estimated for the TID, number 3, what was projected in the original plan, and then the amendment projection from the amendment that was done previously in 2010 is shown. That is shown in page 8. There is a year by year since the existence of the TID increment and how it has reached those levels that we just mentioned for 2018 at the bottom of each of the columns, and then based on the projected. There's one of these for each one of the TIDs, so you're going to see this same information for all the TIDs that were put together. Page 9 just talks about the expenditure period. The expenditure period for a district is 5 years prior to the termination of a district. So the expenditure period for TID number 3 ended April of 2018. And then on pages 10 and 11 are the cash pro forma for TID number 3. There's going to be one of these pro formas for each of the TIDs. So they're going to be very identical. They're very conservatively estimated. So this is the current status of the district since its inception, and we've just started with the last few years. But the district started with a base value at the top of page 10. In the background data, you'll see 1.9 million. Right now, as we mentioned, the TID increment has generated 12.794. And the tax revenues, the district is generating an increment annually of $354,000. That's showing there and carried out through the life of the district. There is computer aid coming in from the state for the district. It's showing here the transfers that this district receives from TID number 6 to pay its expenditures for the debt service and so forth. All the expenditures shown then on page 11 are indicated in each of the respective columns. The existing debt for the district is in column J, and column K through column Q are various components of expenditures. You can see N and O are transfers then that would be made to the general fund and debt service to pay back those funds, and the advanced water sewer in column P. So right now then the status of the district, we'll have recovered all the expenditures in 2023, and that would probably the time it could be closed with more assistance from 6. The city is hoping we should be able to close that a couple of years earlier. Any questions on TID 3? Otherwise, we'll move on to TID 4. Maybe I should just go through this, and then if you have questions at the end. It's all going to be the same for each one of these districts. Okay, so TID 4, which starts on page 12. This was a TID, a blighted TID that was created in 2000, and right now the increment value is currently 26 million, which is over 9 times its base value. So it's a very successful TID right now. Plan was amended in 2001 to expand the boundaries and add additional projects. It became a donor in 2007 and 2010. The designation allowed surplus revenues to flow from TID 4 to underperforming TID, specifically 6, 7, and 10 in 2007, and TID 8 in 2010. Currently, TID 4 is only donating to TID number 8. The support of TID 4 and TID 8 has extended its maximum life to 2034, which is the actual termination date for TID number 8. And TID 4 could close with the prepayment of debt. TID number 4 needs to remain open to support TID number 8. TID 4 is anticipated to close in 2031, when the closure of TID 8 is anticipated. Page 13, again, has the summary information on the TID. It talks about the different dates for creation, expenditure period, and the closing date, an extended closing date, and extended closing date because of the donation. the different amendments that were done, the original project plan, and then 2 donors are shown the bottom part of the page. And again, the increment valuations based on each one of the project plan, original, and then the amendments are shown at the bottom of the page 15. And then on page 14 is that same chart as we looked at for TID 3, which shows the increment history based on the actual from the Department of Revenue, column on the left side, and then the projections that were done in each of the original project plan and amendments. Page 15 just talks about, again, the expenditure period here. This one is still open for an expenditure period, and it does not end until April of 2022. And at that point, no additional expenditures could be made, and right now there is none that are expected to occur. So then here's the cash flow pro forma on page 16 for TID number 4. Same type of a pro forma, background information, the revenues, the increments that are being generated by the TID. Again, very conservative, 0% increase projected. So as you can see, the increments that are generated for tax purposes stay the same throughout the life. Expenditures, we have the debt service, again, showing that is outstanding yet. And then the other expenditures will begin with transfers to TID number 8, transfers to the general fund since this is a donor TID and the successful TID. And as you can see on the far right side under the TID status, this TID has recovered all its expenditures to date. So it's been a very successful TID and is able to make those donorships then to help your TIDs that need support. Okay, TID number 6. This is starting on page 17. This was a TID that was created in 2000. It's a blighted TID. Right now it is an incremental value of just under $22.7 million. The plan was first amended in 2001 to expand boundaries and add additional projects. In 2010, TID 6 became a donor to TID number 3 and TID number 5. The donorship allowed surplus revenues to flow from 6 to underperforming TIDs. Again, currently TID 6 is only supporting TID 3. As I mentioned previously, your TID number 5 terminated earlier this year. So TID number 6 no longer needs a donorship to TID number 5. The legal life of the TID was extended to 2033, which is the maximum legal life of the existing TID number 3 that's receiving donorship from this TID. It's anticipated to close in 2023, and after TID 3 no longer needs additional support. It is anticipated that TID 6 will pay back the transfer it received from the debt service fund. And at the end of 2018, TID 6 received approximately $640,000. On page 18, again, is the summary for TID 6, as with the other TIDs we just looked at. The creation dates are in the middle, and the closing dates. Again, there were 2 amendments for this district. And the type of amendments are shown there, the project plan and boundaries, and then the donor. And then again, the value increments that right now showing the TID has the value increment of $22 million. And then on page 19, there's that same chart showing the years since the existence of the TID and how it has come up to the current valuation based on the actual from the Department of Revenue. And then the other 3 columns again from the project plan and the donor amendments. This one has an expenditure period that will end on September of 2022. And again, no additional expenditures are expected to occur, but there is a time period yet open for those. Page 21 then, here is the pro forma for TID number 6. And again, showing the same information with the increments, transfers in the expenditures to TID 3, to the general fund, and the debt fund to pay back the expenses. And then this one again will have all expenditures recovered by 2019, but it'll have its debt paid off by 2022 is the last year for debt service payments here. TID number 8. This was the TID that was created in 2001. It was an industrial TID. It's currently generated $5.65 million of value. The significant balance that's shown on the pro forma, which is going to be on page 26, we'll look at just shortly, is the result of the utility advances that in large part need to be repaid prior to closing. The plan was first amended in 2004 to expand boundaries and add additional projects. In 2010, TID 8 was declared distressed, extending its maximum life to 2034. And at the same time, it became a recipient TID. Allocations are made from TID 4 to support TID 8, and TID 8 is anticipated to close in 2031 after the repayment of expenditures and utility advances. Page 23 then again shows the summary that we've talked about for each of the other districts. So I'll let you look at the same with page 24. There's the chart that you'll be able to review when you have much more time. And 25, here the expenditure period is ending very shortly, June 19th. So no additional expenditures are expected to occur, and it's just about done with the expenditure period. Page 26 then is the cash flow for TID number 8. And this one is showing on page 26 the revenue section of the pro forma. And again, the valuation increment of $5.6 million, about $156,000 in increment generated each year, and the transfers that it's receiving from TID 6 to pay the expenditures that are showing on page 27. So here's the existing debt that goes out to 2030 for TID 8. And then again, the transfers in the middle to the under the expenditures to the general fund, the transfers to debt service, and the transfer to water and sewer are all showing there. Obviously, in 2031, the majority of the transfers to debt service and water and sewer will be made to reimburse those funds. So, TID number 9. This was created in 2001 on page 28. This is an industrial TID. It was a single parcel TID, and it currently has a negative increment value. So the plan was amended once in 2007 when TID 9 became a donor to 6, 7, and 8. Positive tax increment would be allocated based on the level of need of each recipient TID. In 2018, TID 9 transferred almost $150,000 to TID 10. TID 9 could close any time, but with a negative increment value or termination would not reduce the city's capacity for the purpose of the 12% test. In addition, as previously mentioned, TID 9 is a donor to TID 10, and TID 9 may transfer additional funds to TID 10 to assist in paying off debt and closing both 9 and 10. On page 29 is the summary again with all the respective information that we've been talking about for all the other TIDs. Page 30 is the increment. 31 is the expenditure period. This one ends again 6/19 of 19. And then page 32 has the pro forma that we prepared for the TID. And this is showing the negative or increment that's showing in column D. And of course, that's why it's generating in column F no tax increment revenue. But it does have a positive fund balance, and that's being used to make some of the transfers to 10 and the general fund. So the expenditure should be totally recovered for this district this year. Finally, TID number 10. This was a TID that was created in 2001. It's a blighted TID, 27-year life. TID 10 does not generate enough revenues on an annual basis to cover expenditures, but has a positive fund balance and transfers from TID 9 to make up the difference. TID 9 transferred approximately $150,000 to TID 10 in 18, and based on the current status, TID 10 could close in 2021 after the final debt payment, and that's going to be shown on the pro forma on page 37. TID 9 could transfer additional funds to TID 10 to allow for the closure prior to 2021 with prepayment of the final maturity of debt. Page 34 has the same summary information for the TID that we've talked about with all the other ones. 35 is the value increment spreadsheet. The expenditure period here, this one ends in 2023. But right now, again, there are no additional expenditures expected to occur for the district. And then on page 37, here's the cash pro forma prepared for TID number 10, showing that expenditures will be covered by 2021 and could be closed early. So on page 38, just talks about some of the historical events and impacts that the state has placed on TIDs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, let you review this at your convenience, but state aid for public schools beginning in the mid-90s obviously was increased, and that had an effect on the amount of increment that the districts received from the public schools. Obviously, the recession from in the latter part of the 2000 for the bullet point we got there is Waupaca's 2010 TID increment value was over 3.4 million less than the 2008 value. Very common throughout the state. That was affected to TIDs because of the recession that occurred. Department of Revenue revised TID valuation methodology, and which had impacts in TID, and you can see some of the decreases that were occurred because of that, and the increases that came about because of that. And in 2013, on page 39, there was a technical college state aid increase where the state gave technical college additional funding that obviously with technical colleges reduced their property tax. So obviously there was less increment coming from the technical colleges to TIDs that had an impact. So on page 40, the impact on the city. The city has taken proactive steps to address revenue shortfalls or annual shortfalls that we just talked about for all your 6 TIDs. 2007, TID 4 and 9 were designated as donor districts. To 6, 7, and 10. TIDs 3 and 8 were designated as stressed in 2010. We've kind of touched on each one of those. In 2010, TID B4 became a donor district to TID 8, and TID 6 became a donor district to TID 3, and now closed TID 5. Based on the 2018 audit, transfers from debt service fund to cover shortfalls have been over $3.8 million, and they're detailed below. And I'm assuming that's what's in the audit, Kathy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Baird and the city is routinely monitoring the city's debt for refunding opportunities. Since 2010, the city completed a series of TID-related debt refinancing 3 times. On page 41, actions that are anticipated to have significant impact. TIDs 3 and 6 will close after the debt repayment and developer incentive payments in TID number 3. TID number 3 is projected to close by 2023, but the city hopes to terminate both TIDs by late 2021 with the additional assistance of TID number 6. With the closure of TIDs 3 and 6, the city value will fall below that 12% limitation we talked about previously, and that's going to begin to allow the city to create either a new TID or make boundary amendments to any existing TIDs. Second bullet point there shows TID 4 will need to remain open to support TID 8, and that is, it's anticipated that the $1.7 million advance can be forgiven related to actual infrastructure. TIDs 4 and 8 are expected to close by 2031. And as of 12/31/18, the city has advanced over $3.8 million to cover shortfall in the TIDs. Repayment was determined to be unlikely. TID 6 is in a positive position to reimburse the city. The city will recoup approximately $640,000 as of 12/31/18. The city will evaluate the repayment by other TIDs prior to closure. Baird and city officials will continue to evaluate outstanding debt. valuation for refunding and prepayment opportunities. TID 3 has 2 outstanding debt issues, with all maturities being callable annually. So the city has the option to prepayment these issues if considering closing the TIDs. TID 4 has 2 outstanding debt issues, with all maturities being called annually. And based on the amount outstanding and the interest rates, it would not be in the best interest of the city to refund. The city could prepay, but TID 4 is currently transferring any excess to TID 8. On page 42 then, TID 8 has 4 outstanding debt issues, with 1 callable beginning in 2020. And by restructuring the 2010 issue, which is shortening the final amounts, amortization of 2025, it's estimated that the city could realize gross savings of over $485,000. This would allow for the closure of TID 4 and TID 8 earlier than currently anticipated. So we'll continue to evaluate the potential refunding opportunities, interest rates with the city, and later in this year. TID 10 has 1 outstanding debt issue with final maturity in 2021, and after the final payment, TID 10 could close. TID 9 could transfer funds to TID 10 to repay the 2021 maturity in 2020, allowing for the closure of both TIDs. So you can see there's a number of debt information that we will keep monitoring with Kathy and the city for refinancing savings. Page 43, some observations that we put in here. Significant development and redevelopment has been fostered by the use of TIDs in the city. Waupaca's elected and appointed officials are highly sophisticated in their monitoring and analysis of the city tax interests. You're receiving quarterly reports that are assisting you, and that provides a high level of transparency and detailed in the TID monitoring. Historically, the city has exceeded the 12% value test and has been unable to create a new TID or amend the boundaries of any existing TIDs. And that's shown in these charts. On page 43, it shows the actual 12% capacity from 14 through 18. You can see each year you've exceeded the 12% valuation tests from 2014 of 15.5% through 2018 of 16.7. Each year you've been above the 12. But then if you go to page 44, here we're assuming in these charts we've got a growth of 0%, so very conservative, and a growth of 2%. At the top here, the designation TID 3 is stressed, and the amendment of TID 6 prior to TID 3 provided a mechanism for the city to recover expenditures and allows for the closure of the 2 TIDs as soon as economically possible. So TID 3 and TID 6 could close as early as 2021 with developer agreement and the repayment of incentive payments. Once closed, the incremental value below 12%, and that's showing in those columns for 2021. You're going from 2020 under the assumed growth of 0, the middle column, which has the increment value of 16.58. By the closure of the 2 TIDs, 3 and 6, that drops the value to 8.23%. So you would then be able to create a new TID or expand territories within existing TIDs. Same thing with the growth end of 2%. If you use a very conservative estimate, you can see how that also is the same information. So at the end of 2021, with a 0% growth, we're estimating 16 million in additional capacity available for new TID, or 17 million with a 2% growth at the bottom of 44. 45 in 2020, allowing TID 9 to transfer funds to TID 10 for prepayment of the final maturity of the debt. The prepayment would allow for the closure of TID 10 as early as 2020, freeing up the capacity of 3.15 million, assuming no growth in valuation. While this won't get the city under the 12%, it does free up capacity for when the city does decide to create a new TID. You want to evaluate the repayment of debt service advances as the TIDs close. And in 2022, the city could have as much as 1.5 million available to apply as it chooses. Some options include prepaid debt, reducing debt service in future years, and creating capacity for future debt, use of future projects to be used on, and alleviating the need to borrow. the city would want to evaluate what interest rates are at the time to determine the most advantageous option. And obviously, we would assist the city with that. So the final thing that was put in there was the rating report, and I will not go into that at all. I know that's a lot of information, but it's there for you to look at. Any questions, you can get to Kathy. Kathy, you can get to me. As we said, I think we're going to be back in the fall and go over this in more detail when you're actually will be making some decisions on this. So this is more just for informational tonight.
So
you.
the second handout I have is a little bit easier on the eyes than Brian's. Is what you're normally used to, is seeing the revenues and the expenditures and beginning fund balance and ending fund balance. So on the first page on the spreadsheets are going over from 2014 to projection out in 2026, based on all of those what ifs that staff put in the presentation, that we could close certain TIDs and sooner than 2034. Going over each one of the different TIDs, TID 3 shows where the money is going, where the money's coming in, and the fact that there isn't going to be any remaining increment when this TID would close, projecting at 2022. It would close in 2021, but we get one more year of increment, and that would help in paying back the debt service fund for tax levy support on past debt payments. Same thing with TID 4. We're looking at going out to 2026. There would be no ending fund balances. Everything would be transferred to TID 8 to alleviate any debt and advances from the utilities and advances to the utilities. In TID, the next one, TID 5, just shows where it's ending at the end of the year. It did pay back $18,000 towards its amount that it had from debt service, so there was some money sent back to the debt service fund, and there'll be no distribution this year to any of the overlying tax districts. So pretty much used everything that we had. TIF 6 shows that we're going to pay back the debt service fund, pay off the debt for TIF 3, pay TIF 3's amount due to debt service, and still have an ending fund balance estimated at about $30,000, of which the city would retain about $10,000 of that, and then the rest of it would be given to the other taxing jurisdictions when it closes. TIF 7 is closed. I just wanted to show you as of the end of the year where it ended up. It did pay back the debt service fund. It did pay any advances to other funds, and it did not have any, it has some distribution to the overlying districts in the city. So that TIF is closed. TIF 8 shows where we are. There won't be no fund balance. However, we are looking at paying all but $942,000 of the advance from the water utility, which is almost $2 million. And the advance from the sewer utility, we would pay just over $1 million for reducing that amount. We have to pay back the water utility for the advance amount. Staff has estimated that there was about $942,000 worth of infrastructure put in TIF 8. The PSC will not let us forgive that. We can't forgive the advance portion, but we can take off the infrastructure portion. So that's TIF 8. TIF 9, there will be some residual money left over after it pays the debt in 10. but that money's still available depending on what we do with TIF 10. There would be about 9,000 of that 26,000 would be towards the city. In TIF 10, we can close, like I said, in 2020 and have about 46,000, of which 16,000 would come back to the city. However, we still have the property of the former St. Mary's Church out there. So if we're looking at giving any incentives for that project, we would have to evaluate where we are with that, but also remembering when we can still do expenditures within that TID. The last page shows what the equalized tax rate is, impact of the TIFs. So it shows each of the taxing jurisdictions where they are, and the TIF increment is the top dark blue one. And as the TIFs close, you can see we'll go from a tax rate of 29.52 to a tax rate of 23.03. No TIFs. You're looking at about $6. So the last page I handed out is pretty much the highlights of each of those TIDs, what staff is going to be monitoring this year and putting into the 2020 budget. And at that point, we'll be looking at council recommendation, giving council recommendations for approval to move forward on what we're looking at with TIDs. But my goal is to close the TIDs as fast as possible, be able to get under the 12% so that we can continue to do economic development. TIF 3 now cannot have any more expenditures. Its expenditure period is done. We still have vacant land out there. So I want to make sure that we get into the under that 12% so that we can reconstitute, redo something and with the vacant land that's out there to continue with the economic development there. I know it's a lot.
Thanks, Kathy. And Brian, thank you.
No, I think Kathy summed it up well. The only comment, the recommendation that we had given to her and the city is that want to try and close these TIDs as soon as we can. Obviously, the TIDs are successful. We don't have any TIDs that are projected to have to stay open until the life of the district, which in most cases are 2033, 2034. So when you can close these TIDs early, that's good. That's the goal. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to achieve that goal. The analysis we've been doing.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Al.
The callable maturities that we had, do they bother you at all, Kathy?
Well, no, they don't. Sometimes when we were looking at callable maturities, I'm looking at them because I want to be able to adjust my debt. And kind of by having that, we pay a little bit higher price for it, the callable maturity. But in the long run, it gives us the opportunity, like for TIF,
The flexibility.
TIF 8, to flexibility. I mean, that debt was back-ended to 2034. And now, because it's callable in 2020, I'm now going to be able to move that debt up to 2021 and pay it off now in 5 years based on what we figured instead of 6 years and having to keep that TID open until 2034. So I think there's pluses to it. It's also a gamble, that the interest rates are going to change. But I think we're in a good position with our rating, going out to the market each year to be able to show Standard & Poor's and our bondholders that we do have a fiscal plan, to fix some of the stuff that we have out there and that we want to close these TIDs.
Thank you.
And this will be a good key to give to the Standard & Poor's. That'll be very beneficial for your rating to have a plan like this in place.
Anybody else have any questions? Kathy, to remind me and the council, the Board of,
The Joint Review Board
Joint Review Board is,
needs to meet before July 1st.
okay, and we set a date for that, right?
Did, Sandy?
Wasn't it the 27th?
Yeah, it's
June?
Tuesday.
On
yeah.
Tuesday, that's the 25th.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday, the 25th at noon.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do have a number of people that, I can't remember who's on
The
that.
school district,
Yeah, the school district and then
the
Steve
county.
Hackett.
Hackett, Alderman Hackett, and we have Fox Valley, Paul, and then we have one citizen. Do we have one?
We do. We do.
And the mayor.
And so you're obviously all welcome to attend that meeting too. It will probably not be as long as this one is, but it will
No,
be
I'm
giving.
probably going to just go over, not so much the Baird one, but more my little spreadsheet one. I think the Joint Review Board can see that.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to make sure that the other taxing authorities know what's going on. And if you want to get input from them, this would be a good meeting to go to. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you. Thank you very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Have a safe trip back. Brian. Okay, next up actually is our public input. This is for a non-agenda item, so if there's anybody in the audience or staff or council members that would like to speak to us on a non-agenda item, please step up to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and limit your discussion to 3 minutes or less. Any public input? All right, we'll move on then to new business. We have a resolution number 1429, 2019, which is dealing with the compliance of maintenance resolution. Justin.
Thanks, Mayor, members of council. Page 49 is the resolution that I'll be looking for approval tonight. This is for our CMAR, or our Compliance Maintenance Annual Report. This is done for our wastewater treatment plant as a requirement for, or by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And basically, this report is basically a scorecard of how our treatment plant has performed. So getting into the next page, page 50 of the packet, shows basically a quick rundown of how our plant scored. We're used to getting 4.0s year in, year out, as far as I've known. We had a couple snafus this past year, 2018. So I'd like to review those and go over those fairly quick here. On page 57, we have a requirement for ammonia, which our permit requires us to be underneath 19 milligrams per liter for the months of April and May. We exceeded in April. As you can see on the sheet there, we're over by a couple parts per million. The reason for that is April of 2018 was one of the coldest months on record for Wisconsin. You all remember the 30 inches of snow we got on tax day, April 15th. And our plant operates as a biological nutrient removal plant, so we rely on basically bacteria to remove nutrients from the wastewater. When it gets that cold, they're like us, they kind of struggle. We in the industry think of we need about the wastewater needs to be at least 50 degrees, upwards of 55 degrees for the nitrifying bacteria to basically convert ammonia into other things and to get underneath permit. We didn't reach a water temperature of 50 degrees until May 1st. So you can see we came close. We didn't quite make it. We got marked up on that one. The following page is phosphorus. We had an exceedance in September of 2018. This goes back, I mentioned my last update, we had some unusual flows that we've been experiencing the last few months, where basically the loadings have come in underneath domestic strength. Now, domestic strength is kind of like the low level. It's what we would expect from residential neighborhoods. Commercial's a little bit heavier. Industrial waste is even heavier yet. And we got loadings that were much lower than that, meaning basically we need to feed this bacteria, and when we don't, they starve. Here in September, our phosphorus accumulating organisms suffered, and we exceeded. We had to use chemicals to precipitate the phosphorus out, which we haven't used in close to 10 years. So we had to set that back up again and start using that. And as you can see, the rest of the year, the highest we got was 0.5 parts per million. Our limit is 1. So we had the one bad month, and again, we exceeded our permit. On a positive note, I'd like to direct you to page 66. This is on the financial side. And as I scroll there, I'll give you time to scroll there as well. The very bottom, we added $146,000 to our replacement fund. Now, we're slowly but surely building that up. The DNR would like to see our replacement fund balance at $1.8 million. So with the addition of that, we're up to $808,000. So credit Kathy to helping us out in building up that fund, which just means financially we're getting better every year. So that basically sums it up in a nutshell. The whole report is in there for your review. We did not receive any fines for these exceedances. We have discussed each one of these with the DNR. They are not requiring that we make any improvements or any changes. They're satisfied with how we're operating. So again, just two kind of abnormalities at this point that we're going to chalk it up to. And with the approval of this resolution, we will have to advertise this. And again, that's a DNR requirement that we pass a resolution, advertise in the newspaper, and provide all that information back to them.
All right. Questions, comments for Justin? All right, this is a resolution, so we would need a motion to approve this resolution.
I do have a question, Mayor.
Oh, well, hold on a second now. You can't, okay, go ahead.
The high phosphorus content of Mirror and Shadow Lakes, does that have any contribution to the high phosphorus that we had in September, in your opinion?
Contribution which way? To the lakes or to the treatment plant?
No, the other way, back to the sewage.
Well, if it's in the lakes, I mean, there's a potential that it gets in the groundwater, and then we pump it up. People drink it, it goes down the sewer, and then we treat it. Our influent raw phosphorus comes in anywhere from 4 to 7 parts per million, and then we're able to get that to below 1 part per million. I guess to try and explain what that means, you had a 55-gallon drum full of water. You took an eyedropper and dropped 4 drops of, say, pen ink in it, stirred it around. That's 1 part per million. So that's what we're trying to reduce that down to. So there is some connection. I think we kind of learned that a little bit last meeting. I mean, all the water's connected. General groundwater flows west to east. But I think there's maybe just a minor impact, but nothing you could really chalk up as a silver bullet or that's for sure a problem. So,
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody want to make a motion? To
I'll
approve.
move to approve
And I'll second.
1429.
Motion by Keelan, second by Chestnut, that we approve of Resolution 1429. This is 2019, a compliance maintenance resolution. Discussion? All in favor? Oops, Sandy will call the roll.
Paul Hagan,
Aye.
Dimitri Martin,
Aye.
Alan Keeland,
Aye.
Paul Mayo,
Aye.
Eric Olson,
Aye.
Lori Chestnut,
Aye.
Scott Perchatsky,
Aye.
Mary Fair,
Aye.
and Dave Peterson.
Aye.
9 ayes, motion carried.
Justin, thank you.
thank you.
Next is Resolution 1430. This has to do with local cable franchising. Henry?
Thanks, Mayor. This resolution begins on page 76. There's been a move afoot the last couple years at the national level as well as the state level to kind of change how we manage our right-of-ways and particularly how we handle cable companies. In our city, we get approximately 70,000 in cable franchise fees, Kathy, 65 to 70. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors has reached out to municipalities across the country asking for adoption of this. But basically, it's all an effort to cut into those franchise fees that are paid across the country to municipalities. This particular resolution, the FCC is talking about allowing cable companies to value the public access television station that we have. They can unilaterally put the value on it, and let's say they say it's worth $50,000 a year. How they value it, we don't even get the question. Well, then that would just be deducted from our franchise fee. So that's the serious impact of it. You may have read in the league email bulletins at the state level, there's a push by the incumbent cable providers to slowly reduce that cable franchise fee. We're at 5%, and they want to ratchet it down. So this is something that the League of Municipalities on their radar, they're watching it. And again, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is asking municipalities across the country to adopt this resolution, and that's why it's before you, just to make sure our voices is heard. Voices are heard in this debate. So I would recommend that we adopt it and send it on, include Waupaca.
Okay, you've had an opportunity to read it. It was in your packet. Anybody want to make a motion to recommend this resolution number 1430?
I move to recommend or to adopt the resolution 1430.
Second.
Motion by Martin, second by Olson, that we approve resolution number 1430, 2019. It's a resolution supporting local cable franchising, including non-monetary obligations. Any discussion? Sandy, will call the roll.
Alan Keeland.
Aye.
Paul Mayo.
Aye.
Mary Fair.
Aye.
Eric Olson.
Aye.
Paul Hagan.
Aye.
Scott Prochatsky.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
And Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
9 ayes, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Next, Paul Hagan, we have resolution 1431. This is the 6-year improvement plan for the airport.
On page 78, there's resolution 1431, approval of the 6-year plan for the airport. On page 79 is the actual 6-year plan for airport improvements. About the only thing that has really changed is in 2020, we are hopefully going to purchase snow removal equipment for the airport. Ours is getting old and is breaking down quite a bit. It's anticipated to use 95% Bureau funds for that. That's the only real change from previously.
All right, so airport board is recommending that to council. Do you want to make that in the form of a motion?
I do.
All right, we have a motion by Hagan,
Second.
second by Keelan, that we adopt resolution number 1431. This is the 6-year improvement plan for the Waupaca Municipal Airport. Discussion? Sandy will call the roll.
Alan Keeland.
Aye.
Paul Mayo.
Aye.
Dave Peterson.
Aye.
Eric Olson.
Aye.
Dimitri Martin.
Aye.
Lori Chestnut.
Aye.
Paul Hagan.
Aye.
Mary Fair.
Aye.
And Scott Prochatsky.
Aye.
9 ayes, motion carried.
Paul, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have a revised job description for Technical Service Librarian, formerly known as the AV Technical Service Librarian. Peg.
Thank you, Mayor. The new job description is on page 83. We changed the title as well as changing some of the duties. When we knew that our technical services librarian was going to retire, we looked at the staff that we had, and rather than just hire one, what we did was we combined 3 positions. So we had 2 part-time positions and 1 full-time position. Now we have 2 full-time positions with a slight decrease in FTEs. So the changes to the duty include that all full-time staff are involved in programming for the library. That was not part of the previous job description. We reassigned the collection development of AV materials to other staff so that this person can spend their time on programming and technical services pieces. The previous job description required a master's in library and information science, and we really feel that on-the-job practical training is more important or as important. So our new technical services librarian does not have that, but does have 3 to 5 years library experience, has actually 10 years part-time training and then about 5 years part-time training for this current position. So I am asking for approval of the new job description today. Thank you.
All right. You heard Peg's recommendation. We would need council approval for that via a motion.
I would make that in the form of a motion.
And I'll second.
Motion by Hagan, second by Chestnut, that the council approve of the revised job description for technical services librarian. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried.
Thank you.
We have license report 1448. This is for the Class B intoxicating liquor license, Class B fermented malt beverage licenses, Class A intoxicating liquor license, Class A fermented malt beverage license, Class B fermented malt beverages, and Class C wine license. You can see all of those listed on page 84 of your packet. We would need a motion to approve.
Move to approve report number 1448.
Second.
Motion by Peterson, second by Perchatsky, that we approve of license report 1448. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Could I'd like to take a moment just to commend Barb Roperts of our office. She bird dogs us every year, and there's a lot of work involved in it, and she has to interact with the police department a lot, and so thank you guys. I mean, it's a lot of work to get this in, and we always have a few stragglers, so you'll probably see a few more next meeting, but I'd like to do a little shout out to those folks. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carried. License report 1449, this is arcade amusement device license. You can see those on page 85. Again, we're looking for a motion to approve.
Move to approve license report 1449.
Second.
Motion by Fair, second by Chestnut, that the council approves license report 1449. It's an arcade amusement device license report. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against? No.
We got one absent, so that's two noes? Okay, so we have 7 ayes, 2 noes, 1 absence, motion carries. 1450, this is a change of agent for the 3H Brewer or H.H. Hinder Brewing Company that's on Churchill Street. Henry, anything we need to?
No, this is to get us through to the end of June, because in the previous license report, he is listed as the agent going forward, so we assume rightly, wrongly, that you would approve this agent change. But this really just gets him through, gets that 3H Brew LLC through the end of the month.
All right, so he'll become the agent as of July 1st, too, then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the renewal.
All right, so this is just a change of agent before the license is completed for the year. So we would need a motion to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion by Mail, second by Keelan, that we approve license report 1450. This is just a change of agent for 3H Brew LLC, H.H. Hinder Brewing Company. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carried. We have License Report 1451. This is another fiscal year license that we have, as well as the two that we had before this. These are our scrap dealers. They do have to have a license to work within the city limits, and so you can see the list of those. Again, the clerk's office is recommending that you approve this license report 1451.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Olson, second by Chestnut, that we approve license report 1451. This is a scrap dealer's license. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. We got one more license report, and these, again, this is fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th, and that's why you're seeing so many on this meeting. You can see all of the operators that have applied for bartenders or operators license in the city of Waupaca so far. Again, these would be pending approval of any city fines and a background check by our departments. So we need a motion to approve these.
I'll move to approve 1452.
Second.
Motion by Peterson, second by Martin, that we approve license report 1452. It's an operator's license report. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Down to number 11, communications recommendations of the mayor. Get your calendars out here. I got a few date changes for you. Yeah. So, first of all, I'll give you the good news. Our city council meeting on July 2nd, Tuesday, July 2nd, we are going to cancel that, if it's okay with you. But in place of that, we're going to ask that we set up a committee of the whole meeting, which will be on Tuesday, June 25th. And I just want to, and that's going to be to deal with the retreat results.
Yeah, Wally, we want to get him back to come and present the final document. Well, it'll be the final draft, and there'll be an opportunity for you to input and have a discussion.
Say the date again.
The 25th. And we can start that at 6 o'clock. Anybody want to start earlier or earlier? Paul, you're the one that usually can't get here too soon.
Perhaps 5:30 would be, but I work till 5 at the Veterans Hall.
So is 5:30 okay?
5:30 would be okay.
Okay, 5:30. Sandy? Anybody else? Can I see a show of hands of who can attend on the 25th that you know right now? All right, so we'll have more than a quorum. It'd be nice if we obviously get everybody there, but. And then also, the City Planning Commission meeting is actually on July 3rd because we switched that to the first Wednesday of the month. So we're going to, those of you that are on city planning, that's been changed to July 10th, Wednesday, July 10th. And I'm pretty sure, Henry, that's a meeting that we need to have.
Yeah, we've got a couple special use applications coming through.
We do have a city planning meeting tomorrow yet, but next month's meeting will be on the 10th. Okay? And Paul Mayo, as long as I'm remembering too, don't forget that you are sitting in the hot seat on the 18th. I will not be here, so. Okay. I think that's it. Anybody else have anything for the meeting? Paul Hagan? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mary.
You can go first.
No, he's going to just say adjourn, and then you won't get to say
Oh,
anything.
okay. Well, and I probably should have said this earlier, but I just want to commend Justin and Roger and our whole street department for being supportive and helping with the crosswalk painting and getting it prepped for us and having everything out. And it was absolutely a wonderful event, and I hope you all have seen it. If not, check out Union and Main Street and Union and Fulton. It looks great. So, thank you.
I actually saw it on Facebook from my daughter in Japan saying that my hometown is better than your hometown, so.
Nice. All right, thank you, Mary.
Yes.
Much appreciated. I know that was a lot of hard work, so appreciate the efforts
fun.
of your group. Paul?
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Hagan, second by Keelan, that we adjourn our meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion carried. We are adjourned at 7:15. Be safe on your way home.